Welcome to the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network, a weekly broadcast sponsored by CVC Coaching, hosted each week by industry speaker, coach, author, and educator Jerry Eisenhower. Our presentations are produced to assist business owners and managers in turning their business dreams into their business realities. And now, here's your host, Jerry Eisenhower.
And I want to welcome you to another edition of an episode number 69 of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network, sponsored every week by the CVC Success Group, where we provide the tools to make your business dreams into your business realities. Reach out to us and let us see if our systems, our processes may be what you've been needing to reach your business reality. Turn your business dreams and turn them into your business realities. So, what's today's subject matter? This is episode number 69, and this is one that we probably all need to work on. So the question for you is, how do you handle termination and firing of an employee? Because this is a part of management. We have to do this at times. So how well equipped, how prepared are you for this delicate task? Because it is a delicate task, and things could certainly go haywire into this. You know, one of the movies that I looked at about 10 years ago was a movie by the name of Up in the Air. It was released in 2009, and it was a story about a guy, and it was a real life story. His name was Mr. Weller, and what he was played in the movie by George Clooney. And what his job was to travel around the United States and fire people. In other words, he was a contract firer. So you would contact his company when you needed to fire someone, and he would come in and take the case up and do it for you. And like he said in the movie trailer, if you look that up on the internet, you know, what he was doing was doing the job that people were too weak to do. He also said you got to be prepared, because whenever you fire someone, strange things can begin to happen from that point. So you need to get on your P's and Q's. And today's episode is all about various ways to get up on your P's and Q's. I recently got an ebook from a company called Zenfits, and what the title was, A Better Way to Fire Someone. The Compassionate Guide to Employee Terminations and Offboarding is the way it was titled. Now, there's two reasons that someone could be getting terminated. One could be a layoff from business into a downturn. Remember, that movie was produced in 2009, and multitudes of people around the country were being terminated from jobs through layoffs. This was the economic state we were in at that time. That may be hard to believe at this day and time, but if this economy were to change, where all of a sudden there was a business downturn, you may be faced with termination through layoff of some of your people. So here, let's start through this. So these are some of the questions that they went through in this ebook, which I thought was very interesting. And one of the questions was, how many people do you know who've been fired or laid off? Have you ever been fired or laid off? The basics of how do you do this, the terms and definitions that you need to understand as a manager. You also got to understand the laws and regulations pertinent to employee terminations. And you got to have an employee termination checklist, your guidelines for firing and layoffs. So these are the things we want to go over in today's session. So again, how many people you know have ever been fired? Or have you ever been fired from a job or laid off? Because it happens all around us, believe it or not, all the time. As a statistic, in 2018, there was 155.76 million people employed in the United States. Believe it or not, in 2018, 20.4 million were fired or laid off, representing roughly 13% of the workplace. That's pretty amazing considering the employment in this time. So And, so what we've got to do as managers is learn to deal with terminations in one way or another. Now, we're not going to be talking about layoffs in this particular episode. We're going to be talking about terminations that you're firing someone. You're terminating their employment. Okay. So if you've ever been through this, if you've had to fire or you've been fired, it's a very emotional experience. And we often think of this as being a taboo on our professional career. There are events you desperately hope won't come up at the next interview, certainly, or at your Thanksgiving dinner. But it still is a nagging worry in anyone's when they look at their background and they've been fired. So layoffs and firings are a natural output to the business cycle. Sometimes we look at this that there's a shame culture around it. But I want to give you another idea to think of that was shared by Larry Winget, one of my mentors and coaches. Because when you're firing someone, what you're actually doing is releasing them to go and search for something that may possibly be better fit for them, because you're firing them for a reason. They didn't fit your culture. They didn't follow your processes and procedures. You had to discipline them too much, whatever the reason there is. But people do lose jobs. They lose them. But we don't talk about that a whole lot. A lot of times it's just crickets out there. So what we want to go over today is some practical tips in how to pull this off successfully, because you're going to be in the hot seat whenever you're discharging workers. So your first thing is you got to know the laws, the regulations, and employer best practices, because what's happening when an employee loses a job, their income stability vanishes immediately. They have dependents, they have bills, and they have debts. All of these things can overwhelm them during a firing session and simply send them into shock, or worse, could turn into a violent situation. So you've got to keep this. You've got to understand, strong grown men will cry when they're fired. It's going to happen. So got to be ready for this and the emotions that are going to come out. You see, in an involuntary termination, you may be because there's a more cost-effective alternative to this person. You may be firing for poor performance, excessive tardiness and absenteeism, failure to abide by company policy, insubordination, misconduct. Any number of reasons could be why you're being fired. One of the things that you need to understand is, do you operate in a state that is called employment at will? This is definitely something you need to be aware of. And if you don't know if you're operating in a state where there's employment at will, you need to be sure to know that. So you've got to know any exceptions to the rules that you're going to apply. And it's going to depend on the state that you live in. You may have at times that there's an implied contract with someone. So you've got to be aware of this. Now, some states do not recognize implied contracts. Those states are Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Missouri, Montana, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Texas, and Virginia. So you got to be aware of what the laws is. Okay. So you've also got to understand what good faith is. And you've got to be very careful not to do a wrongful termination. And you also have to be aware of discrimination. You cannot hire or terminate employees in 2018 based on their physical characteristics, their skin color, their ethnic, their gender, their religious beliefs, pregnancy, relationship to other people, among other reasons. There are also state lists that protect working classes to various degrees. So again, you've got to research your state and federal laws that govern this, because there are federal, state, and local laws that will prohibit discrimination. There's federal laws that will address the layoffs, and there are laws that address benefits that may be available to employees who lose their jobs. So be very aware and do your studies. Again, let's talk about the discrimination side because there are a lot of things here that are involved. One is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, the Uniform Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, and the Family and Medical Leave Act. So you've also got to be aware of a federal law that addresses layoffs, such as the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act. And that's going to apply if you have more than 100 employees. Laws that address the benefits available to employees who lose their jobs, you can find this under the Consolidated Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, or COBRA. That's what's going to carry on their insurance. The Employment Retirement Income Security Act, and the Federal Unemployment Tax Act, FUTA. So you want to be aware, and again, you should have a human resources person that can assist you and guiding you before you go through this process. Now, before you terminate an employee, ask yourself some questions. Ask yourself in questions. Number one, am I doing business in an at-will employment state? Number two, what are my state exemptions? Number three, do I have company policies or procedures that help govern the employment relationship that I must follow? And you got to ask yourself, are you following the guidelines of law? Am I acting in fairness and with good judgment? Have I given my employees a chance for improvement? And am I aware of any discrimination, bias, or operating outside of discrimination? Be aware of this. And as you head towards employee termination, you need to develop your checklist. But see, one of the things is your termination checklist has got to start as soon as you hire someone. Now, at CVC Success Group, Brandy Biswell, one of our coaches, has strongly recommended a very deep onboarding process. This is where you are communicating your internal procedures, you're maintaining the integral conduct with your company's stated policy, and ensuring that each and every one of your employees know the internal regulations and the protocols that now start immediately. Do you have an employee handbook? If not, you need one, because this is part of how you're going to build your termination checklist. And in an employee manual, you want to over communicate. Make sure that you state your policies in plain English and obtain a written statement that the employee has read and understood the company policies. You see, if it comes time for him to let an employee go, you need to have a thoroughly documented process which protects you from litigation, can help keep good terms with the discharged worker. There's several things here. Number one, all too often, some employee may have mashed your button. They have just made you so mad that you had fired on the spot. You let your passions take over. But this is not the way you want to handle it. Anyone that's being fired should be well aware that they are on the road to this destination. They should have had warnings. They should have had warnings prior to this point. You see, firings or termination due to cause from the employee, such as poor performance, a bad fit for the job, poor conduct, any number of things that's in violation with your company culture and your company mission. And if you are in a state that operates with at-will employees, at-will employment, you're naturally going to have a much easier time than if you have a state law that prohibits this. Because you can fire an employee at any time with no advance notice, pending agreement with any state exemptions and or discriminations protect you. Okay, so let's include some basic practices to firing. And we also have to remember this. This is going to be a very emotional time. It's going to be emotional for both of you. So you've got to take the steps and be comprehensive in what you're doing, knowing your rules and knowing that ultimately you are responsible for choosing what the termination process looks and feels like within your organization. In the case of that hiring is being considered, here's some of the things that you need to check for. Did you distribute your company expectations and procedures? Did you go through disciplinary procedures with the person? Did you inform them when infractions occurred? Have they signed an acknowledgement from themselves about the infraction notice? Have they provided an opportunity, or have you provided an opportunity for the employee to improve? You see, that's what good management is all about. It's all about coaching your employees to a higher level. If there hasn't been improvement, have you documented the case and notified the employee again about the infraction? Have you thoroughly investigated everything? And this is going to involve your performance review of your staff. This has to be a regular rhythm of having this. Step 3, what's the penalties? Are the penalties clearly defined for your rules and regulations? You got to prepare for the meeting. Put together a report for yourself to use, which would be called a termination report. Prepare a letter for the employee that states why, and be prepared at the time of termination to have all your paperwork and documentation applicable to your state requirements. You've got to know, when does the last paycheck have to be delivered to them? You've got to inform your HR department, your payroll department of all the necessary items that are going to need to be covered. You got to let your benefit plan administrators know this, your health insurance, other people, they got to know this. Schedule anytime you have a meeting on this in a neutral location. And it's always a good idea to have someone else in the room with you. It could be someone that's higher up for you, or it could be from your HR department. Okay? Now, one of the things that's setting up, and this is about compassion and following up with employees after they leave you, asking them, how are they doing? How are things going? This may give you some easy ways to learn to do this better. Conduct a meeting and come prepared to the meeting with your written and printed documentation for all necessary findings. At the time of the termination, tell them what the last day of their employment will be. Clearly and gently communicate what this means to them, including their final pay, where to pick up the final paycheck, their COBRA insurance, or any other things that they're going to need to know to move forward. Be prepared to get their keys, access codes, computer, hardware, other access objects. Let the employee know how they can get help in placement. And if you have a severance package, this is the time to discuss it with them. You've got to discuss this if you do have a severance package. But again, you got to be compassionate. This is going to be an emotional time. Again, grown men will cry in this. Do this at a time of day when the terminated employee won't have to pack their things in front of their friends or colleagues. The best time to do this is at the end of a workday. There's nothing worse than going through and seeing your coworkers and they know you've been terminated. These are the things that you need to know to be aware of how to do this properly. As an employer, as a manager, these are things that are going to come up that you're going to have to deal with. You see, often these are where we're not doing the job we really should be doing. If we're going to be the manager, then we have to make sure that the people on our team are productive members, they are following our culture, they're doing business to the processes and procedures that we've set up. And if someone needs to go for the good of the team, it's your job to make this decision. Yeah, it's tough, but I want to discourage you from the mash your budding firing. Someone comes in and does something today, right now, and you let your emotions take over and you fire them right on the spot. This is probably not going to be the best way, and it's not going to produce the best results. Remember, when you fire people, fire them with compassion. Let them know you're releasing them to find something that they'll be happier in, that they will succeed in. Approach it with compassion. Approach it just like you would want to be approached if you were on the other side of the desk in this conversation. And that ends this week's episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network. We appreciate you joining us every week as we try to share with you various tidbits, various ideas, concepts that you can put to work in your business. It's sponsored every week by the CBC Success Group. Our team of subject matter experts is here to help you. What we want to do is give you tools to make your business dreams into your business realities. Your business exists to take you where you want to go in this world, to provide you the means to enjoy life. And that's what it's all about. Being self-employed, being a manager should be a time of pleasure, not a time of stress, not a time of headaches, not a time of heartaches. Let us know how we can help you make this your reality. Well, thank you for joining me. This is Jerry Eisenhower with the CBC Success Group signing out another episode of the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network.
Thanks for joining us here each week at the Chimney and Fireplace Success Network, sponsored by CVC Coaching, providing you the coaching and educational outreach services you need to move to your dream destination in business and in life.